It's been 10 months since the regime started with their ICE deportations. Now, ICE has been an issue since 2003. ICE flights have been an issue forever, but nothing has been as severe as it has been since Trump became president. But I do want to say that it is important to note that some of these instances are not new. American Prospect, who I highly recommend following and subscribing to their emails, came out with this article that talks about ICE and their immigration flights. I also think it's important to note that Avelo and Global X, they are two aircraft carriers that are doing this for money, even though they refuse to pay their flight attendants and are refusing to work with their flight attendants who, one, are trying to unionize and have yet to been able to create their first contract. I think it's important to also note that some people are forced into these situations because they have to work. A pile of drawstringed plastic bags sits on the tarmac in front of a charter plane awaiting inspection before going into the cargo hold. Each one belongs to a migrant in ICE custody and carries the few personal belongings they're allowed to bring with them when they're deported, or when, as is more often the case, they're shuffled from one detention to another. To the activists who monitor ICE flights, it's a familiar sight taking place 40 to 50 times a day at airports across the country. To the Avelo crew at San Diego's Miramar Airport on July 3rd, it was probably still pretty new. Avelo began flying for ICE in May. Employee searched the bags by himself, ultimately finding more than 24 hazardous devices. A photo attached to the email shows half of them, one clearly labeled Work Pro Lithium Ion 20V 1.5 AH, which is a battery power pack used for power tools, suggesting its owner had been grabbed from a job site and held onto it. And that is a sizable battery, holding about 10 times as much energy as an average cell phone. This really stuck out to me because they're literally being deported with the clothes on their back. They're being deported to places where they have never been before. Usually they have nothing. Job sites, construction workers. And they're being ripped away from their lives because they're fucking Spanish. A fellow employee described in the July email resisted pressure from the ICE officer. This does not appear to be an isolated incident. In September, Sarah Nelson, the head of the Association of Flight Attendants Union, which represents 225 Avelo employees, sent a letter to CEO Andrew Levy. She wrote that, based upon reports we're receiving from our members, she had grave concerns about Avelo's ICE flights and that flight attendants had been, quote, discouraged or prohibited from performing required safety checks. Flight attendants ensure that FAA safety requirements are met. If passengers, including ICE staff, refuse to comply, she added, we need to understand how you are ensuring written policies are followed and what are you doing to ensure the cooperation of ICE staff. The letter echoes accounts from flight attendants from another ICE charter, Global X, who told ProPublica in April that ICE officers and contracted guards treated them like, quote, maids, refused to comply with their safety instructions, and even reported them to supervisors for making safety-related requests. Levy has yet to respond to the union letter, not unusual for him considering Avelo's flight attendants unionized more than 3 years ago and are still trying to get management to negotiate their first contract. This now goes into depth about the fear flight attendants are having with the lack of safety concerns from ICE officials and how ICE officials are treating the immigrants that are on the planes. But flight attendants for ICE charters say this is unlikely on ICE flights because all adult migrants and some minors are shackled with handcuffs and leg irons attached on a chain around their waist, regardless of gender, age, disability, criminal background, or lack thereof. 71% of migrants in ICE custody in September had no criminal convictions. Migrants deemed unruly can also be wrapped in a restraint device similar to a straitjacket and or have a hood placed over their head, making evacuation all but impossible. In 2021, Capital and Maine obtained internal reports showing ICE flights had to be evacuated 6 times between 2014 and 2019. One took 7 minutes to evacuate, another took 2.5 minutes. Needless to say, even 30 seconds might be the difference between life and death in a crisis. The evacuation times of the other 4 are unknown. Avelo flight attendants have received inadequate guidance on how to evacuate shackled or otherwise restrained passengers, the union letter said. Global X flight attendants told ProPublica they had also received inadequate guidance on evacuations, with some saying they had been told to save themselves. Flight attendants have also long questioned how migrants can reach for oxygen masks since their handcuffs are attached to a waist chain, and on November 13th, an Avelo ICE flight declared an emergency when the cabin lost pressure, according to air traffic control transmission. The plane made a rapid descent and landed safely. Of 88 people on board, 6 were injured, an emergency notification message said, experiencing nosebleeds. The notification does not say how many of the 6 were migrants, guards, or crew. The afternoon of October 26th, an activist who goes by JJ in DC was tracking one of Avelo's dedicated ICE planes, which have all been painted white to remove company branding, as it flew a scheduled ICE route from Mesa, Arizona to Denver and then Las Vegas. It was supposed to continue on to the ICE detention hub of El Paso, but hours later, public flight databases showed it still was on the ground in Las Vegas, indicating a mechanical issue. After 4 hours, another Avelo ICE plane was dispatched to Las Vegas, but upon arrival, it also just sat there in a back corner of the airport, primarily used for loading cargo. Could the second plane also be having a mechanical issue, he wondered? The planning for Avelo's ICE flights also have been a disorganized mess, according to an Avelo employee who agreed to speak on anonymity. The employee declined to describe specific delays for fear it would make them identifiable to Avelo management, but added, everyone has heard of at least one incident of this by now. That's the saddest part in this, the employee said. How quickly you get desensitized. Neither Avelo nor ICE responded to questions about how long migrants and crew were stuck on a plane in Las Vegas. Flight databases show a third Avelo ICE plane arriving in Las Vegas on the evening of October 27th, nearly 30 hours after the first one landed. Many of the flights have been delayed for maintenance or other logistical reasons, leaving shackled migrants stuck on board for hours, sometimes soiling themselves, the employee said. Migrants have reported soiling themselves on ICE flights for years because they say some ICE officers and contract guards won't let them stand up to use the lavatory. Flight attendants also get stuck in these long delays since FAA rules prohibit them to leaving an aircraft if there are passengers on board. And because they are only paid when the boarding door is closed, long delays can also be unpaid. It's important to note that ICE has been an issue since the very beginning, and this is why we need to abolish ICE. But I think now more than ever, more people need to understand that these ICE flights are not safe. These ICE flights are very dangerous. I made a TikTok a couple of weeks ago regarding these straight vests. They're literally called for people who are harmed to themselves or others. You are trapped and stuck, your arms and legs plastered to each other. And imagine being in that position for hours, even though you're meant only to be in that position for less than an hour. These are in my opinion, a form of torture. And also being stuck on a plane, shackled for hours on end, not being able to go to the bathroom is a form of torture in and of itself. Human rights violations we are seeing throughout the United States needs to be talked about more and more. The United States needs to abolish ICE the moment the Trump regime is out of office, because it is clear that ICE is more of a liability. ICE is more of a group of thugs than they are protecting our country. And I think the more we learn about ICE, the more horrors we are going to see. Follow the American Prospect. I wanted to plop around a little bit of the article, but go read the entire article for yourself. Support. This is why independent media matters, because they are doing the true work that mainstream media fails to do, and that is reporting on the truth regarding the severity of the human rights violations that are happening throughout the country regarding the Gestapo.